Good afternoon to all. I am Dr. Shivram BS, Senior Technical Officer, CSIR NAL Bangalore. On behalf of LIS Academy, I wish you all safe, healthy, happy, and prosperous New Year 2021 and hope we all will be out of this pandemic crisis. I request all participants of this distinguished lecture to mute their audio and post their questions on Q&A box, which will be taken after the talk. Friends, warm welcome to third Lisa Distinguished Lecture Series. Lisa Distinguished Lecture Series is a unique platform to learn, exchange new ideas, perspective, and opinions on LIS domains from distinguished personalities of various domains, including LIS domain. Lisa Distinguished Lecture Series has successfully completed 2 lectures delivered by eminent speakers. The first and the inaugural lecture was delivered by Padma Bhushan, Professor P. Balram, former Director, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, who spoke on science publishing, greed, vanity, and the decline of scholarship. The second lecture was delivered by Chairman AICTE, Professor Anil D. Sahasrabuddhe, who spoke on role of libraries in implementation of NEP 2020 framework. After 2 insightful and motivating lectures, today we have an exciting lecture on restoring pride of a place to libraries and librarians, a demand-side perspective, by Dr. Sandhya Shekhar, former founding CEO, IIT Madras Research Park, advisor and strategy consultant. And this talk will be presided over by a great supporter of LIS community, a successful entrepreneur in information industry, who is popularly known as Satya among LIS fraternity. Shri N.V. Satyanarayana, CMD Informatics India Limited, Bangalore. I heartily welcome today's speaker and president of this event. It is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Sandhya Shekhar. Dr. Sandhya Shekhar works as a management and strategy consultant. She also works with educational institutions, both in an advisory capacity as well as a visiting faculty. She serves as an independent director on the boards of Simpson & Co. Limited, Bimetal Bearing Limited, IP Rings Limited, and Amco Batteries. She also serves on several advisory boards and companies, including consultative companies, for the formulation of India's science, technology, and innovation policy, that is STIP 2020. She has occupied several CXO positions in the industry over the last few decades. She was the founding CEO of IIT Madras Research Park, the first university research park in the country. Earlier, she has worked as a director, Asia Pacific Consulting, Gartner Incorporation, CTO, bconnectb.com, head knowledge management research, Aptech, and group consultant at NIIT. She is alumna of IIM Bangalore and IIT Madras. She is a recipient of several awards like the Outstanding Doctoral Research Award from European Foundation for Management Development and Emerald, Excellence Award at Gartner, Outstanding Achievement Award at Aptech and NIIT, and Outstanding Women Achiever Award during 100th International Women's Day. An author of several books, papers, and articles, her book on knowledge management was the first Indian book on the subject. Her latest book, titled Managing the Reality of Virtual Organizations, published by Springer, has received worldwide acclaim. With this brief introduction, I once again welcome Dr. Sandhya Shekhar and request her to deliver the third Lisa Distinguished Lecture. Madam Sandhya Shekhar, please.
A very good evening to all of you. Indeed, delighted to be here in the midst of this wonderful bunch of librarians and library scientists who I have always had enormous respect for. And so when Mr. Satyanarayana and his gentle but persuasive way requested me to be part of this session, I was only too happy to oblige. I have often wondered, why I find myself in the midst of so many librarians of late, on various events and occasions, in spite of the fact that I really don't belong to the fraternity. It is indeed an honor. And besides the fact that perhaps the benevolence of friends is one of the reasons, I also believe that perhaps there are a couple of important points of intersection between what all of you have to offer and what I do. The first, of course, the very obvious point is that, like most of us, I'm a huge consumer of knowledge, and you're all the source of knowledge. So that's a very obvious supply-demand connection over there. The second, from a professional perspective, as some of you might know, one of the areas of my specialization is knowledge management and innovation. And in a number of ways, what all of you do is a certain facet of that discipline, of the larger environment of a knowledge ecosystem. So, which is why I thought, I would perhaps share with all of you the demand side perspective and see what is the point of intersection between the way you perceive it and perhaps the way the users of what you have to offer perceive the current scene of things. The title itself could be construed as being a little provocative because I have used the word restoring. I have said restoring pride of place to libraries and librarians. So that assumes something, isn't it? It assumes that there was a time when libraries and librarians were really looked upon virtually as gods in the knowledge ecosystem. And somewhere there seems to be a diminishing of that pride of place. Now, that is my perception, and it was important for me to understand before I started talking about the entire gamut of things today to figure out whether all of you perceived it to be the same way. So, in fact, I had suggested to Dr. Kunur that since we all have to operate in a virtual mode today where I don't have the benefit of a direct, real-time, face-to-face interaction with all of you, perhaps we should do an opinion poll. It serves two purposes. Number one, it lends it a greater sense of interactivity. And number two, it helps me to validate some of my assumptions before going forward. So let me actually share with you what all of you have told me in terms of how you perceive the state of affairs. So let's begin with understanding what is the current status of libraries and librarians. Is it a cause of concern, or are we just assuming that something is wrong when something is really not wrong at all? So what is it that all of you feel? The consolidated results of your responses look like this. The whole question to all of you was, the future of libraries and librarians in India is a cause of concern. The options were yes, somewhat, and not at all. So it was interesting and not very surprising to find that almost about 83% of you felt that there was certainly some cause of concern. There are only about 17.4% who feel that no, there's no cause for concern. I mean, everything is just about fine. Why are we worried? So I'm going to proceed on the assumption that there is a fair bit of concern about how should we carry forward the ethos of libraries and librarians, especially in the context of a country. And I think this thought seems to resonate with a large majority of all of you, as can be seen from the books. So that kind of gives credibility to the title of my topic, which is, if it's a cause of concern, then maybe it's useful to have a discussion around how do we address that concern. So my second question to all of you was, the explosion of new technologies, teaching methodologies, and business models are making it necessary for libraries and librarians to reinvent themselves. So what I'm trying to validate with all of you is, can it be business as usual? Most of us who belong to the slightly older age group are used to seeing libraries as the fulcrum or the source of knowledge. And you could not conceive of a system without a very robust library. But today, certain assumptions are actually being shaken. So it perhaps cannot be business as usual. Perhaps we have to do something different to make the libraries as relevant and as important as they were to us earlier. And that assumption of mine has been validated by 91% of all of you who feel that given the explosion of new technologies, given that teaching itself, the process of imparting education itself has undergone such a monumental change, the business models of the industry have changed drastically, making them more dynamic, more agile, and more knowledge dependent. It probably puts the onus on libraries to function quite differently to the way they've been functioning so far. So basically, we are on the same page as far as two issues is concerned. Yes, there is cause for concern. And two, we need to do something different. Okay? So what we will try to understand is, what is it that we need to do? And it occurred to me that while I'm planning to talk about it, perhaps all of you already have the answers. And if so, we should find out what these answers are before I launch into my own discussion. Okay? So the third question that I had asked all of you was, I'm very clear what I have to do in the next few years to stay relevant. So if there is absolute clarity in terms of what needs to be done, it obviates the need for a discussion. And maybe a platform like this would be sufficient to just transfer that knowledge or that understanding so that everybody works towards the same goal. But this is something which needs to be explored a little further. And responses are interesting. 72.5% of you say that, yes, we're quite clear what we need to do. However, 24.8%, almost 25%, have said that we are somewhat clear, but maybe we're not completely clear. Okay, so that's interesting. And the rest of you have said, not at all. We don't have a clue as to what we have to do. Okay, so there's a good chunk of all of you, about 20, 27, 28% of all of you, who are perhaps not entirely clear as to what needs to be done. I mean, there might be a general idea, but perhaps there is some lack of clarity. So if there is a gray area, maybe there is a potential to find out what is the way forward, and also to find out whether those of you who believe that there is absolute clarity in terms of what you have to do is validated by the other end of the spectrum, because all of you represent the supply side of knowledge. And in your perception, you believe this is what needs to be done. But if we were to look at it from the other side, the users of knowledge, what are their priorities? And so given their priorities, what is it that all of you can do to be in sync with those priorities And are they the same or congruent with what all of you think is fairly clear in terms of the way forward? So let's see what all of you feel you have to do over the next few years. And Dr. Kunur has very nicely helped to prepare these bar charts based on your responses. And what you people have told us is this. So you believe that your top priorities are upskilling of ICT digital competencies, followed by reinventing library services for the present context, followed by new sources, new knowledge resources, content development, followed by striking new relationships and communication with the end users. And some of you have felt that there is a need for a change in the LIS curriculum itself, which is a fundamental change in which library information is taught, library sciences are taught, and so there needs to be a fundamental revamp. So this is your perception. Now let us see, if you stick to these priorities, are you going to be able to meet the expectation and demand of the users of knowledge? And that is what today's discussion is all about, so that we can validate our assumptions and forge a way forward. Right? Okay, so let me begin with, why do libraries matter to the industry? And why am I even speaking about the industry? Because the normal connotation is for the users of libraries. You would say they're academic institutions. And so why am I talking about the industry? They're academic institutions, they're research. But let's look at it. What are academic institutions? They are the source of supply of skilled manpower to the industry. And ultimately, it is the industry, which are all the organizations and the research institutions, who are the eventual consumers of what libraries do. So it's like any other marketplace. A supplier has to supply what the market demands to stay relevant. If the market does not want you, you don't stay relevant anymore. It is as simple as that. So if industry perceives that I have enough knowledge sources available to me, the internet itself gives me a plethora of information. There is actually an information overload. I have huge amounts of knowledge supply. I have my own training institutions, which I stock up with whatever material I need to use to train up my people. Why do libraries matter? Why do libraries matter as much as they used to matter earlier? So that could be a potential cause of concern. So I think in any system, in any ecosystem, there needs to be a synchronicity between the users and the suppliers of any product or services. And that's precisely the lens through which we are trying to examine the entire issue as far as today's topic is concerned. So let's then look at, why do libraries matter to the industry anymore? And by industry, I'm using the term a little loosely. You can assume it to mean the organizations and as well as the research institutions. So this is something which is worth understanding, right? And here's where I would wish to share my feedback, not based on my subjective assessment of what the industry feels, but actual empirical evidence based on the research that I've done over the last several years. Here is one of the critical findings of a cumulative research that I've done over a period of time across a very large sample size of knowledge workers. Now, knowledge, KW there in that slide, stands for knowledge worker. And knowledge worker is really a term which can be used in any context. Anybody who works with knowledge is a knowledge worker. So it could be a researcher, it could be an employee, it could even be a student. And when I explored over a cross-section of domains as to what was it that actually influence performance. Now, as you would all know, the industry is really grappling to understand, how do I improve organizational performance? How do I improve individual performance? Okay. Do I bring in better technology? Do I recruit from the best institutions? Do I have better infrastructure? Do I have an array of products or services that are absolutely cutting edge? What do I do? How do I improve my performance? Interestingly, what I discovered was the one factor, the single one factor that actually causes a 68% variability in performance across individuals is what I've called knowledge transfer effectiveness. Just think about it. It is huge. What do organizations do normally? Oh, they take up quality measures, they look at how to improve quality, reduce rejections, and a whole bunch of other things. And it provides an incremental advantage of 5%, 10%, 15%. But here is one single factor, which is actually causing a variability of 68% in outcomes. So if there were one thing that every organization has to zero in on to say, how do I plug this? How do I ensure that everybody raises to a certain level of performance? It would be really important to look at something like knowledge transfer effectiveness. And that is something that is a real eye-opener. I mean, we all know that knowledge is important, right? But in what way is it actually linked to performance? And this is really where the learning was. So knowledge transfer effectiveness leads to a 68% variability in performance. Okay? So that's the first data point that I would like to part with you. You might want to understand, how can knowledge transfer, I just call it KT here, seem to be effective? Okay. So I've said effective knowledge transfer. Please mark my words. Okay. I've not just said knowledge transfer. I have said knowledge transfer effectiveness. Okay? So there is a lot of emphasis in the word effectiveness. Right? So how would you and I perceive knowledge transfer to be effective? And this is really where I'd have liked a lot of interaction with all of you. But since we have to be doing this offline, let me just go ahead and share with you some commonly held interpretations of knowledge transfer. When do we perceive that knowledge transfer has happened? Because all of you are in the business of knowledge transfer, right? You are people who put knowledge together and then transfer it to people who require this knowledge. So that is the quintessence of your activities. Okay? So since that becomes your fundamental business, it will be interesting to understand what is your perception of when you perceive a knowledge transfer to be successful, when you see as having happened. And generally, one would think that transfer has happened, knowledge has been transferred when it moves from source to sink. When you are sharing a research article that has been solicited by a researcher and making that available to him or her, it has moved from the source to the sink, from the supplier to the consumer. So knowledge transfer has happened. Okay? And since it is the right article and what he needs, maybe it is effective. So that could be one generic interpretation of knowledge transfer having happened. What could be another facet? When it is understood by the user. There are a lot of case studies. In fact, in one of my recent books, which is managing the reality of virtual organizations, I've talked about the problems encountered by a German multinational when the people in the Indian factory, were trying to use design documents sent by their head office. The whole thing was in German. And German was translated by somebody who was doing a word-to-word translation. So that's not how we speak English. So when the translated version came, The people here could just not make head or tail of these design documents. Okay, so it's not just important to transfer that design document, it has to be understood by the user. So for knowledge transfer to be effective, you could say it is effective if it not merely travels, but is also understood by the user. So that could be another interpretation of knowledge transfer as a number of people see it in normal parlance, right? Okay. In short, what are we saying? We are saying that knowledge is replicated. It is available in one place, okay? And if it is made available in another place by transferring it without any garbling of the content, it is transferred. In other words, it is replicated from point A to point B. Would you agree? That's really how we look at knowledge transfer, don't we? We think it is replication. So now what did I find out? Okay. What I found out was this. Okay. If on the one hand, we have said knowledge transfer effectiveness is leading to 68% of variability in performance, and we see good replication of knowledge as being effective knowledge transfer, what is knowledge replication doing? And this came as a shock to me. If you enable proper knowledge replication as we have understood it, it is causing a mere 2% of variability in knowledge worker performance. Now, isn't that absolutely astounding and mind-boggling? Knowledge transfer as we understand it, which is transferring knowledge, okay, through, let us say, a training program that gives you a manual by which you can operate a piece of equipment, or somebody saying, here is how you're doing a particular task, and so I'm transferring this document to you, please use it, okay, or a particular chapter of a book being communicated to the user or the learner. And that's how we actually look at knowledge transfer, which is basically knowledge replication. But when I just studied knowledge replication alone, the process that we are all most familiar with, it was leading to just a 2% variability in performance. So this is really an eye-opener. So where did the answer lie? To cut a long story short, after iterations and having actually looked at how organizations work and research institutions work, because this was research which was conducted over a large spectrum, cross-section of institutions and organizations, I came to the important understanding that knowledge transfer can be perceived to be effective, not merely if it is replicated, but there are two other important elements that have to happen for it to be an effective knowledge transfer. And what are these two elements? These two elements are adaptation and innovation. So the knowledge that is being transferred has to be adapted to the environment in which it is being used. Okay? And that is constituting 20% of the variability in performance. Not only that, the knowledge that is being transferred has to enable innovation based on the context in which it is being used. It could either be translational research, or it could be an innovator or an entrepreneur trying to come up with a new product, or it could be an organization trying to get competitive advantage. It's not merely enough if you access knowledge. You have to be able to get the knowledge in such a way that you can innovate based on the nature of the knowledge that is available. You have to have the capability, the wherewithal, and the inputs to be able to innovate based on the knowledge that is transferred. And these together are contributing. Innovation contributes to 48% of the variability, and adaptation is contributing to 20%, So a lot of us think that when when the whole world, especially in India, we keep talking about innovation, is it all a fad? My friends, it's not a fad, because you look at the sample size here from which I quoted these numbers. It's a very large, relatively large sample size of about 1,207 knowledge workers, with having about 873 team members, 265 team leaders, 69 project managers, and so on. So it is, and it's across multiple domains. So this is the common result that has emerged, and it is significant at the 0.01 level. Okay? And adaptation and innovation together are contributing to 20% and 48% respectively of performance. So obviously, what are the users of knowledge, which are these organizations, trying to focus on? They're trying to focus on innovation. That is their priority. They will do anything to aid innovation and adaptation, because that is what is going to help them with their top line and bottom lines. That is what is going to increase their performance. So that automatically becomes a priority. But interestingly, when I then studied where do these people stand currently with respect to these three parameters, that was also extremely interesting. But because what did my research reveal? My research revealed that on a 5-point scale, where are these knowledge workers currently? They score on a scale of 5 when it comes to their ability to replicate knowledge, transfer it from point A to point B. They scored 3.4 on a scale of 5 when it comes to their ability to contextualize that knowledge in the context of what they are doing presently. And they score a relatively low 2.2 on their ability to innovate based on the knowledge that they have been supplied. So while innovation is the biggest contributor to their performance, currently they stand at only 2.2 on a scale of 5. So my friends, clearly this aspect is a high priority item for all the users of knowledge, the organizations, the research institutions, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, whoever. So they will all be looking at this. What can we do to improve? So that, my dear friends, is what the market, the users of knowledge are demanding from you today. Tell us ways, give us ways by which we can innovate better. We can adapt better using the knowledge that is provided to us. So whatever you do in future, if it is synchronous with that overriding objective of organizations, you will always stay relevant, because this is the need of the hour. What is the onus on libraries and librarians? If this is the requirement, what should all of you be doing differently? What kind of knowledge is required? What should be the librarian's role? What should the future library look like? Okay? So clearly, if a librarian looks at himself or herself as somebody who is providing books or articles or journals to whoever requires it, that is only facilitation of replication. You've got to understand, if this knowledge has to actually make an impact in a way that cannot be ignored, then you people become extremely important to the scheme of things. Nobody is going to ignore you. They're going to actually come after you. Your services will be highly sought after. Okay? So what is it? What is it that we need to understand further to be able to get to that goal of the users? And that's what I would really like to have a discussion around. But what I'm going to share with you are really bullet points which are a tip of the iceberg, because each one of these things that I've highlighted here requires a huge discussion. And some of these topics I have spoken about earlier on different occasions. But I just would like to share with you, especially from a librarian's perspective and a knowledge perspective, as to what could be looked at, and perhaps we can have a more detailed discussion around it later. But to share with you some of my personal thoughts about it, here is what I feel. Now, effective knowledge. What is effective knowledge? We talked about knowledge transfer effectiveness. For the knowledge to be effective, we very often say that, knowledge is an intangible asset in the balance sheet of companies. So for that knowledge to be effective, the kind of knowledge that is provided has to be precise, has to be contextual, it has to be reliable, it has to be timely, it has to be multidimensional. And each one of these things is important. Just let us look at each one of these briefly. Why do I say it has to be precise? If I do a Google search on a particular topic, I get, thousands of sources, thousands of documents. I don't have the time to go through it. I'd rather receive a precise answer to my question. So if I am a seeker of knowledge, I need somebody to cut down my effort of, sieving through that maze of information, that information overload, and give me something which is precise, which is summarized, which is close to what I need. And everybody is going after that because that means a huge saving of time and effort for me. And therefore, time and effort translates to money. So effective knowledge has to be precise. It has to be contextual. It has to be based on the context in which I'm solving a problem. Otherwise, I'll be all over the place. The solution that I'm seeking may not even address my concern. It could be very far removed from my context. The way I solve a problem in India, for instance, could be very, very different from the way it is solved in the United States or in Europe. So it has to take into account the local realities, and that is contextual knowledge. And the provider of knowledge has to make sure, depending on the profile of the user, what is most relevant, what is most contextual in the context of what that person is doing and hoping to achieve. It has to be reliable. When I say reliable, I again go back to the fact that we have access to all kinds of, even if something is published, everything that is published is not necessarily reliable, right? Because we are all aware of how two reports can be completely contradictory and confounding. So who do we believe in this era of knowledge abuse? So there has to be somebody, some entity, some bunch of people, some mechanism by which we can ensure to some extent the fact that knowledge is both reliable and ethical. Okay? So there is clearly a need to focus on that. It has to be timely. It has to come to me on time. And lastly, what do I mean by multidimensional? Today, more and more research is pointing to the fact that innovation happens when multiple streams of knowledge come together. It is no longer homogeneous. So it's no longer the fact that, let us say, when you're developing a software product, as somebody like Satya would know very well, you only need software engineers. If software companies are using psychologists and social scientists and people like that, it is because there is a need for multidimensional knowledge. Number one. And number two, you can easily transpose solutions from one domain to the other. So what do I mean by transposing knowledge? Let me give you a simple example. For instance, let's look at civil engineering, the science of construction. Right? Today, we know that there are a lot of people in that discipline who are really looking very, very closely at biomimicry, the way birds build nests that are resilient across bad weather and typhoons. In building weather-resistant tenements, civil engineers are looking to see, is there anything that we can learn from nature? So flora and fauna is being studied. Biomimicry is being studied. So best practices from this domain is being transposed into a completely different domain. So you need people who understand this, who understand the need for knowledge to be multidimensional. If I'm looking for a problem to be solved, the supplier of knowledge has to be able to feed me potential solutions or related inputs from multiple streams. And that's how innovation happens. Okay? So you see, you're no longer communicating just a research article or a book. You're understanding what is the context from which a user is coming from. How can I make this whole business of knowledge transfer a lot more robust, a lot more effective? So the way we are beginning to look at knowledge and effective knowledge is completely different. And you, as knowledge transfer executives, have to be completely clued into that transformative change. Okay? The other thing is, what should be the role of the librarian? I really see, I mean, I have, in terms of getting the users closer to effective knowledge, I think I have already outlined what your potential role is. But if I were to crystallize them, encapsulate them into two words, I would see the role of librarians as being knowledge aggregators and knowledge curators. People who have access to a monumental amount of knowledge sources and are able to put them all together. So your first role is that of a knowledge aggregator. Okay? The second role is that of a knowledge curator. People who not merely provide thousands of articles, but provide maybe just 10 articles which are absolutely spot on, bang on, contextual, reliable, multidimensional, and timely. Okay, so that makes you a knowledge curator. Okay, so while you might all be right in saying that you need to develop digital skills, I see that only as a skill. A skill can be acquired. It is easy to acquire those skills. But unless that skill is transposed on the kind of responsibility that you have, with a clear idea of how your role has to be shaped going forward, merely acquiring that digital capability may not be sufficient. A bot could do it, for instance. I mean, if I'm being a devil's advocate, I would say that, maybe there will be a loss of jobs. Maybe artificial intelligence will actually take over the role of a librarian. But the answer, no, it will not. As long as we are clear that there is a certain enhanced role of the librarian, if you look at it as a knowledge aggregator and a knowledge curator, because that is where your intelligence comes in. That is where your value addition comes in. Okay, so this is really a huge topic, and in the interest of time, I just wanted to park these ideas with you. Okay. And then, what should the future library look like? I think in talk that I gave some time back, I have talked at length about my dream of what a future library should look like. But I really, I mean, to kind of summarize it very, very quickly, I see these as knowledge centers, and it is very, very important for us to actually be very, very sensitive to the fact that the library, as it was envisaged earlier, might actually become quite obsolete. And it's an apprehension that I share as a well-wisher, because that's the last thing I want for the library. Libraries or even bookstores should never become redundant. Okay? I will give you a personal example, for instance. At the time that I was doing my PhD at IIT Madras, I remember a whole new floor was constructed in the library building. Okay? A fantastic floor full of the most modern furniture. It had a coffee dispenser, extremely comfortable ambience. A lot of money had gone into creating this additional infrastructure to benefit the users of the library. And it is such an inviting place for somebody like me. I mean, I just took to it like a fish to water, and that's where I would park myself and do most of my research work. One day, the then director of IT Madras walked in and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see that at least one person is using this huge facility that we have built." But because, believe it or not, I was the only one on that floor in the library. Why does this happen? So I just want to park that thought with you. Why did it happen here? And how can we make things change? Have things change? These are all questions that we need to ask, which have answers. Like I said, that's an entirely different topic. But suffice it to say that I really see these as knowledge centers where, and which could be either virtual or physical. Going forward, I think we need to have hybrids of libraries, which are virtual and physical, and they're a blend of tacit and explicit knowledge. For those of you that are familiar with this, explicit knowledge is the kind of knowledge that all of you are very, very familiar with. The documents, the research articles, things that are structured and available. Tacit knowledge is what is in the minds of people. So if you look at the framework that has been provided to us by Nonaka and Takeuchi, the forerunners in the field of knowledge management, they talk about a framework where it's a quadrant really, where individual knowledge turns into group knowledge, which becomes very, very robust through a process of socialization. Okay? So knowledge grows as it is shared and discussed. What we're doing today, for instance, this entire forum is basically one such example of a confabulation, a conversation between people so that we share our understanding of common problems and issues, and that actually leads to a rapid growth of knowledge. And that's what libraries should facilitate. So that's very, very briefly about the future library, and there's a lot that can be said about it. Okay? So I would really like to wrap up now and say that this was just an attempt to see how we can really synchronize what the users of knowledge have in terms of their priorities. And if the libraries could align themselves with that, then I think you could really become the most important resource in the entire knowledge ecosystem. And there will be people, you'll no longer be asking questions. It will no longer be, is it sustainable? Do we get the funds? If people see a need and if people see value in what you're providing, definitely there are going to be funds. Okay? So I think there is a need for that alignment. And I hope that today's discussion will perhaps take us closer to a conversation between the suppliers and the users of knowledge, so that in this digital era, it becomes very, very obvious as to how we have to reinvent ourselves, how technology providers have to reinvent themselves, how people like the wonderful work that Satya's organization is doing in terms of the technology facilitation also plays an extremely important role in bridging that gap between supply and demand in a way that is most meaningful to the users of knowledge. And I really believe that the time to transform is now. And so with that, I would like to conclude and wish you all the very, very best as we forge a new era of a very robust library and, of course, librarians and library scientists ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, madam, for exciting and interesting talk on restoring pride of place to libraries and librarians, a demand side perspective. I am sure your talk gave a new direction for LIS community, especially for budding professionals presently who are at crossroads. Your insights about effective knowledge transfer with a key ingredient of innovation will help librarians and libraries to reposition as per market demand and become an important part of knowledge transfer life cycle. The new roles, what you have suggested, is really interesting for LIS community who are engaged in knowledge transfer and dissemination for decades. I once again thank you very much, madam. Now, it's my proud privilege to introduce today's presidential guest, Sri N.V. Satyanarayana. Sri N.V. Satyanarayana, Chairman and Managing Director of Informatics India Limited, Bangalore, doesn't require any introduction to this audience. However, as a customary, I introduce him. Mr. N.V. Satyanarayana, popularly known as Satya, is an information entrepreneur and a professional librarian rolled into one. Currently, as the chairman and managing director of the company, he has pioneered the online access to information in the pre-internet era. He was a member of the National Task Force on Information Technology and Software Development, a working group on content creation and content industry constituted by the Prime Minister of India 1998. He is the chairman of the working group on libraries and knowledge network, that is LKN, Karnataka Knowledge Commission, and a member of Research Council of National Institute of Science and Communication and Information Resources, NISCARE, New Delhi. Satya has 100 plus publication to his credit in various academic and industry journals and conferences. He is the recipient of Young Information Scientist Award by the Society of Information Science in 1992. With this brief introduction, I request Mr. N.V. Satyanarayana to deliver his presidential remarks.
Good evening, friends. We have all passed through a very difficult year. The difficulties seems to continue for some more time. The new year has just started. I take this opportunity to greet you all for a safe and secure new year. I hope that the new year will bring in a time which is far different and far better, and soon we all will be able to forget the past and carry on with new and challenging times ahead. Once again, I wish you all happy times and happy new year. Thank you very much, Dr. Shivram, for your kind and very generous words. Friends, I'm very happy to be with all of you today. It was a good opportunity for me to listen to my friend, Dr. Sanjya, who just now gave an excellent talk on a topic very close to all of you, that is the pride of place of libraries, which perhaps need to be looked at restoring. I partly agree with her. Dr. Sanjya looked at the whole topic from an entirely different perspective. Yes, we are all concerned always about the position of librarianship as a whole in the communities and the society as such. And so obviously, sometimes we may be feeling whether we are getting a due share of ours. Again, today, if you look at it, the LIS profession continues to face the challenge of change because of technology, because of people's change in the very use of information itself. So the entire activities of libraries and librarianship from an entirely different perspective, which is very clearly spelled out in her very title itself, title of the talk. She called it from the demand side perspective. As librarians, you are always concerned about your users. They are your demand side. But where is it that you need to really look from that perspective now? But if you look at it, you are looking consciously more from the supplies perspective and look at from the demand side perspective more somewhat subconsciously. Now, why is it so? Let me give the example. Most of the time, you are focusing on your user from a collection development perspective. That used to be so far long. That changed in the recent years, shifting to access. Now you are looking from the access side of the perspective, which is largely driven more by the technology than what Sanjay calls the demand side perspective. The user is there, but he's more in the subconscious. Now, you always buy what they need. You want to provide access to what they need. But did you ever ask this question? Why do they need? Then you will get a much better perspective of planning for their needs. That's what I guess Dr. Sanjay has tried to drive home. And her lecture is very scholarly. Of course, Sanjay has a bond with libraries and librarians. She has a very interesting and very pleasant genetic connect to LIS. You'll be very happy to know that Dr. Sanjay has, at another level, a strong connect with LIS profession. She is a specialist in knowledge management and she is a practitioner in that area. She has written a book on knowledge management. She has also written another book, which Dr. Shivaram mentioned, Managing Realities in Virtual Organizations, which is published by Springer. Her book on KM was published by Tata McGraw-Hill. And she is a scholar, of high order. Although she has published only 4 research papers, you'll be surprised to know that these 4 put together have more than 450 citations. And her H index is 4 because she has published only 4 papers. As you know about H index, you may publish 100 papers and still have only 4. So her H index is absolute in nature by the number of papers she has published. And more importantly, her scholarship is revealed in the whole approach to this lecture, and every scientific scholar goes by evidence-based, empirical. And she developed her whole lecture based on a survey which she did prior to preparing for her lecture to know what is the current status of the library, what is the perception of libraries about themselves, about the services, and what challenges they are facing. So she did that understanding of LIS profession through a survey of some 4 questions. She explained that, and it was somewhat revealing to me when I went through her survey report, beautifully presented. And what is even there, it is pretty revealing that LIS profession is concerned about the future. And when it comes to it also, what is very happy about the whole thing is it has confidence. It knows, it has a clarity on what needs to be done to ensure a brighter future. That really is a very great, confident and optimistic view. Almost 72% expressed clear clarity in the concerns we have about. But when it comes to where they need to focus, prioritize, the first priority is improving the skill sets from the technology side. Yeah, that's very important. And the second priority is improving or reimagining or reinventing the whole range of library services they offer. Now, that is where you really need to look at more and more consciously from the demand side, and not exactly the way LIS profession did in the past from the collection side and the access side alone. And based on that survey, she put a question to all of you. A very simple, interesting question. Why do libraries matter to the industry? Of course, what she meant, why do matters to the life industry, when she used the word industry, is she refers to any organization. If you look at it, society spend enormous time and money and effort in educating people to become productively employed. Libraries, in my perception, are two things in this context. One is library is a knowledge center. All of us know about it. And the second is library is a learning place. So people go to acquire knowledge to libraries. People acquire knowledge during their academic studies and in their workplace, primarily with the objective of becoming productive, gainfully productive to the society through wherever they are employed. And what Dr. Sanja brought out through her own studies is something very interesting. I was surprised by that. Every organization, including our own company, and not just the companies, every institution in the world have several concerns. The key concern is improving its performance effectiveness for better results, be it a university or be it a company. At the end of the day, if people perform effectively and produce better results, it will serve the good of the society at large. So, her own observation, for the what she used the term knowledge transfer effectiveness. That means people learn, continue to learn, either as students or teachers or employees in the company or wherever, they learn to be productive. They gain knowledge to be productive, which means they have to transfer the knowledge they have acquired to productivity in the organizations where they work. That's what I think she refers to as knowledge transfer effectiveness. So that knowledge transfer effectiveness is one single factor which is responsible for the productivity by almost 68%. That's amazing to hear from her. And we also feel that, every day in the workplace, people who are knowledgeable and who can effectively transfer the knowledge they have gained, either in their, scholastic career or when they are working, when they effectively transfer the knowledge in the workplace, then they become better performers. But the interesting fact is, in the knowledge transfer cycle, she also said that is another very, surprisingly a big concern, which we somewhat feel at times, but I didn't know that the real rate of transfer of knowledge between what you really absorb, what she mentioned in the whole process of delivery of knowledge, from delivery to understanding and replication, and then putting it to use, the KT is only 2%, which means while we acquire knowledge, all of the knowledge really does not get transferred in the workplace to become productive and effective. And it happens, the may be difficult to transfer, but a large part of what we have acquired as knowledge, if we are able to transfer effectively, then the organization sponsor. But why is it only 2%? And that is where she tried to explain to us and to let us know that two things, adaptation and innovation, are important. While we transfer the knowledge in our workplace, that KTE happens, now it has to happen through effective adaptation and through an innovation process. Fine, I have learned enough, I have adapted and transferred my knowledge in my workplace. That's about 20%. I will continue to do my job, but how do I improve? That comes by innovation. So, but I also have an issue here when it comes to libraries. In the whole knowledge transfer process, the role of libraries, as all of us know, she also mentioned, we deliver through a discovery process. We make available uh, a system for discovering knowledge first, discovering the knowledge that is available all over the world, not just in our libraries. And when the users discover that knowledge, the library's role is to effectively deliver. And then when it comes to understanding replication, now I'm still not sure what role the libraries can play, because that is a role much depends on one, the educational ecosystem, and of course the workplace ecosystem, and to what extent the libraries would matter in promoting innovation in the users is something I would think more in terms of the quality of library services. Now, she talked about the onus of libraries in this context of knowledge transfer effectiveness. That is what she mentioned, effective knowledge. She beautifully defined that, precise, contextual, reliable, and timely, and multidimensional. Now, when it comes to helping users in discovering information and also delivering that information and packaging it effectively for them to choose what they need and to make sure that what they have, what they got from the services library provided is really what they are looking for, is something in the domain of librarianship. And that's what she meant to be precise, contextual, and reliable. That in fact reminds me what Ranganathan said always. You all remember when he talked about reference service or documentation, three words he used always. The service quality should be measured by, pinpointed, exhaustive, and expeditious. He defined documentation in that respect, right? It should be the pinpointed, exhaustive, and expeditious delivery of information to the user. And that's what Dr. Sanjay means when she talks about the role of libraries, the onus of libraries in effective knowledge transfer. And librarians deliver relevant documents. Can they deliver relevant answers also? Now, this is a question I would like to ask you. Can the services librarians provide really help users to find directly the answers? When we say that we provide information, that stops at providing document, like a few relevant papers or the most relevant book. Now, if you look at it today, the way the discovery services can be redefined in the coming years with the emerging new technologies, that is the artificial intelligence and machine learning, it should be possible for libraries to develop the services to a level where users can ask the questions and get the answer, not just a set of documents. That is going to be a real challenge for the LIS profession. And it is possible. And when Dr. Sanjay says, when she tries to answer the question she put, what the kind of knowledge required, she says that the libraries should be truly knowledge centers. That means helping users to get the right knowledge they are looking for, answers to the questions that they are looking for, solutions to the problem they are looking for. In fact, years ago, you must have already heard about this. IBM came out with a machine, they called it Watson, which won hands down in a quiz program in US. They call it's a national quiz program. It's called Jeopardy. And in that program, two national champions participated against Watson. It was an intelligent machine. And it won hands down in all the rounds. And in the back end, what is that Watson? They put together a large collection of reference books, the Wikipedia and all other reference books, and based on AI, they developed this whole system where it could quickly answer the most difficult questions, which even those champions in quiz program were struggling to answer. Now, why I'm trying to say this is the technologies that are emerging today will greatly help librarians realize the dream of, you know, going beyond just delivering documents, but can also help users to find the answers. We are seeing it at the consumer level with things like Alexa and all that. Now, in the coming days, how you can make your libraries truly knowledge centers using these emerging technologies is something you really need to take it up as a challenge to become an effective knowledge transfer agency from library's role, which is an onus on all of you. So, which effectively means obviously the libraries have to reinvent librarianship, their roles and responsibilities, and not only that, what kind of libraries the the both the current and the future generation will be requiring. So I would look at here a couple of things. One is in this to really reinvent, first you have to look from scholarship. Go back before, librarians have a strong connect with scholarship. In fact, librarianship emerged through the needs of the scholarship when you go back to even earlier days of Nalanda and Takshila. And so one is that connect with scholarship will have to get stronger, which unfortunately has got diluted a bit over the years. Second, the domain. Acquire domain knowledge of whichever area you want to specialize. Virtually today, you see the discipline of informatics emerging in all areas. You have bioinformatics, chemoinformatics, geoinformatics, and whatnot. So, knowledge of the domain in which you provide the knowledge based services is critically important. And the third, of course, is technology, which I mentioned in an example. When I talk about the scholarship, the librarianship should really become a stronger part of the scholarship. When I say that, reminds me a very interesting story. You must have heard about Chanakya's Arthashastra, a great discovery that happened, and which world was taken aback on that. And very interestingly, this happened in Oriental Library of Manuscripts in Mysore. About a century ago, a little more than a century ago, I guess, Maharaja of Mysore appointed one Shama Shastri, a great scholar, a multilinguist, and as a librarian. He was designated as the librarian of Oriental Manuscript Library. There is a very interesting story. When Maharaja of Mysore visited Germany, and when he was introduced to the vice chancellor of a university which he was visiting, the vice chancellor asked him, are you the king of the place where Dr. Rama Shastri comes from? Maharaja was taken aback. And when he came back to India, he called Shama Shastri and told him, uh, Miss Shama Shastri, we are the master here and you are the subject, but in Germany, we are known by your name. How did it happen? Shama Shastri, when he was appointed as a librarian, and the Maharaja told him, your responsibility as a librarian is to mine the entire knowledge in the library hidden and come out what is undiscovered. And Shama Shastri, in that process, was able to discover Chanakya's Arthashastra, which was hidden, and not only that, several such manuscripts, which was brought to light and then republished and published in several languages. And later, he was made the director of that institute. Now, that is the kind of librarianship we need today. And if you even you don't have to go too far back. Dr. Ranganathan, who became, who is the father of library science, whom we not just, remember every year on his birthday, but also adore him. He uh, he himself is a great scholar and a mathematician, and he became the librarian. So remember this one aspect, the librarianship will have to get closer in its bond with the scholarship. Friends, if we become stronger in scholarship, I'm sure that the pride of place which Dr. Sandhya mentioned, certainly will be restored. If you closely look at and address these three issues, what I mentioned, scholarship, becoming an integral part of scholarship, be acquiring domain knowledge of the area where you work, and third, of course, the technology again. And it was indeed a wonderful lecture. And in this realignment, what I called the profession and the professional association plays a major role. I must congratulate Dr. Konur while thanking him for inviting me for this program. Well, for an excellent service the Academy is doing today in the last 4 years. And that really brings in strength to the profession, which should be encouraged wholeheartedly. So I really compliment you, Dr. Konur, and your Academy for the series of lectures you have been arranging and a lot of programs you have been arranging, which is certainly excellent. So with this, I hope I haven't really made a long lecture. The presidential lecture should be much briefer. So I would also like to make one announcement before I close. All of you know that we have organized from informatics along with three other organizations, LTC 2021, which is in its fifth year, and we had series of pre-conclave sessions. On 27th and 30th January, we have 4 days of conclave program. Each day will be just 2 sessions to make it convenient for people to attend. Most of you might be aware of it. I welcome you all again to join us at that program. One of the things that I would like to mention here is we have instituted an innovation award. As Dr. Sanjay said, the innovation, is so important for people to be very effective in knowledge transfer. So it's as much important even for libraries also. You will get more details to send your nomination. I'm sure a lot of you must be doing a lot of innovation in your libraries. Do send your nomination, and you may be getting the award. So with this, I once again thank LS Academy and Dr. Konur. I appreciate Sandhya's effort in really, in some way, bringing a new perception to our thinking. I'm sure we'll start looking at the demand side of more consciously than what we did so far. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you very much, Satya, for thought provoking and encouraging remarks. You have aptly analyzed the talk of Dr. Sandhya Shekhar and blended it to the taste of librarian community. Thank you very much. Now we will have question and answer session. I thank both speaker and president of this event for taking the questions of the participants and giving their valuable answers and suggestions for the queries. Now, I request Professor P.V. Konnur, President, LIS Academy, Bangalore, to propose vote of thanks.
Respected Speaker of 3rd LISA Distinguished Lecture, Dr. Sandhya Sekhar, a renowned management consultant, former founding CEO, IIT Madras Research Park, and advisor and strategy consultant, Chennai. The president of this occasion, Sri N.V. Satyanarayana, Chairman and Managing Director of Informatics India Limited, Bangalore. Dr. B.S. Sivaram, Senior Technical Officer, NAL Bangalore, and Advisor, LIS Academy, Bangalore. It is indeed a proud moment for LIS Academy to organize its 3rd Distinguished Lecture in its series of monthly lectures. LIS Academy is putting its humble efforts to organize and unite the LIS professionals by organizing different professional events to enable the professionals to listen to the eminent personalities of our country and abroad and contribute to the profession at large. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Sandhya Sekhar for delivering the 3rd Distinguished Lecture of LIS Academy. Madam, your inspiring words will go a long way in preparing our professionals suiting to the needs of our day. Your ideas of effective knowledge transfer with a key ingredient of innovation will help librarians and libraries to reposition as per market demand and become an important part of knowledge transfer cycle. On behalf of LIS Academy and on behalf of my entire fraternity of LIS profession, I thank you profusely for your support and encouragement extended to us through your lecture. The president of this occasion and the lover of libraries and librarians, Sri Satyanarayana, Chairman and Managing Director of Informatics India Limited, Bangalore, has always been an admirer and supporter of LIS profession in general and LIS Academy in particular. Sir, I profusely thank you very much for your inspiring words. On behalf of LIS Academy and on behalf of entire profession, I thank you profusely for your support and encouragement extended to us through your presidential address. I thank Dr. B.S. Sivaram, Senior Technical Officer, NAL Bangalore, and Advisor, LIS Academy, Bangalore, for his excellent anchoring. I thank all the participants for their active involvement in all LIS Academy events in general and this lecture in particular. As already mentioned by Dr. Sivaram, let us all meet for the 4th Distinguished Lecture of LIS Academy on Saturday, the 13th February 2021 to listen to Dr. Sudha Rao, Fulbright Scholar, Harvard University, Cambridge, USA, CEO, SDM Education Society, and former CEO of Karnataka Jnana Ayog and former Vice Chancellor of KSOU, Mysore. Thank you one and all.